another episode of Gov Tech Today. I'm your host, Jen Seha, and here at Gov Tech Today, we aim to bridge .com and .gov. Have a couple of guests that I'm really excited about, mainly because we have these kind of conversations on the regular. I have Heide, Cassidy, and Eugene Martinez here. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Let's go to Heide first. Ladies first. Tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of what brings you here.
Absolutely. Really excited to be here, Jen. Thanks for having us on. Heide Cassidy. I am a career public sector consultant. I've spent the last 30 years working across 7 consulting firms, everything from strategy to implementation. I worked at an SI to staff aug and have worked on some really incredible procurements and really incredible transformation projects. So I'm really excited to be here today and for this conversation.
Awesome. Eugene?
Yep. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. I've listened to you all the time, so yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's one of my favorite podcasts. Like Heidi, I'm pretty much a lifelong public sector consultant. I've been working as a consultant for about 30 years, 20 years in state of California, focusing on my home state. Love working with the state. Done several pretty large projects within the state of California, future public health, helped out with CSPS, a big project that's coming out.
Statewide payroll.
Yes, statewide payroll. Lots of projects in my history. Looking forward to a fun conversation.
So you guys have seen some things to give it like a little bit lighter of what I really am thinking, which is like, holy smokes. You've seen it good, you've seen it bad, you've seen all the insides and outsides of it. I mean, I don't think I've been in this for 20-ish years, and I will tell you, like, at least in California, Eugene, you're pretty legendary. Like, you haven't worked in California and really dug into the procurement and not come across Eugene. And Heidi, your expertise is more in the Northwest, like Washington area, but now you're doing more work in what other states?
Also doing work, have done work in Oregon, have done some work in Hawaii, some work in Montana, and then in my prior history did some work on the East Coast as well. So I've seen a broad swath.
You've seen some things too. I love it.
Yes,
yeah.
but there's nothing quite like California, right?
California
Boy, isn't there ever? Like, that's why jobs like mine exist, for better or worse. But
It's true.
Just today, I was speaking at a Little Hoover Commission, which is like our government efficiency, what goes right, what goes wrong kind of body in the state of California. And the topic was IT procurement, IT projects, and why they go wrong and how we fix it. Now, Eugene and I have shared many of discussions over this, so I know he has really great insights on it, and frankly, insights that align really closely to mine, which I always appreciate. Eugene, what do you think we do wrong?
I think that's kind of a loaded question, right? Because there's different definitions of success depending on who you're talking to. And if you take a step back, government really isn't about speed and efficiency. It's about checks and balances. That's how we're structured. And I think it's when you look at the procurement pendulum, everyone's talking about how long it takes. Well, I'm sure if you strip back a lot of the policies and made it really fast, you're going to steamroll right through the requirements.
Sure.
And then you'll probably get some projects that are not as successful as you'd like them to be. And then, of course, the legislature and others are going to say, hey, what happened to these projects? And they'll enact lots of changes. And then it'll make it really difficult to procure things. And I think it's just where we are in the pendulum. So it really depends on what your definition of success is going to be.
Right. I think the other side of that is like, why is this so expensive? Why is it so much more expensive for government versus the private sector? Like, are the vendor community, are they just taking advantage of us and charging us whatever they want? Like, what's the answer to that?
Well, I mean, I think there is a bit of that's also a bit of a loaded question. I think private sector companies, they are in business of making money, right? And one of the things that's really challenging with working in the state, and one of the reasons why I think all of us have had the careers that we've had and the length we've had, it's navigating this complexity within the state. With complexity comes a price tag.
Mm-hmm.
And when it becomes really, really difficult to do business with an organization, the price is going to go up. Now, the question really becomes, are they ethical business partners? And I'd say for the most part, most of the vendors that are out there are ethical business partners trying to do the right things. It's really difficult to get success when the definition of success is constantly changing for the different programs and the projects that we're trying to service.
I think also, like, time is money
Yeah.
to these guys. And so also risk is money.
Yes.
If you want a vendor to assume all the risk, you also are going to have to pay them more
Right.
in order for them to be willing to enter into this business agreement. So you're right. It is sort of the perfect trifecta of this is why we have to charge more, and we are good business partners, and you have to be ethical and above board. Otherwise, you won't last long in this industry.
No.
But yeah, it is. Government is hard. It's more expensive. It is the way it is.
It is expensive, but there are ways to achieve some efficiencies, right? I mean, I do think that if there has to be a bit of autonomy that's allowed to different departments and agencies to do their job. I think there's that stress between centralization and decentralization that we always talk about, and specifically in terms of procurement. I think the pendulum has swung where there's a lot of centralization and a lot of control over kind of how things are being procured.
Yep.
Well, that adds administrative burden to the procurement and the people who are responding to these procurements and the people who are administering these procurements. That's a challenge. And you're not necessarily getting the best outcome still, even though you've layered on the administrivia that you've layered on for these projects. I do think that there is an opportunity, I'd say, to maybe push some of the decision making out to agencies and departments and allow them to purchase what they need because they're closer to the programmatic needs, and they can flex and adjust based on the needs of the programs and the projects a little bit better. But you have to be able to hold them accountable to delivering on the outcomes that they're saying they're going to go deliver on.
So Heidi, where have you seen it that's better than this? Because this sounds awful.
Well, I don't know if there's any perfect geographic location that's figured out procurement, right? But there are a few things that I've seen that I think, could potentially be beneficial to think about. So in the state of Washington, they just recently went through a big reform exercise where they created a whole bunch of master contracts that allowed agencies, they had all standard terms and conditions, they had standard scopes, pre-qualified vendors, and they allowed agencies to then use those contracts to not have to conduct their own procurements, but they could go direct to those vendors and almost direct hire. Those agencies, because they knew their requirements best, could then transact business in literally a month. It was a matter of just kind of putting the paperwork together. And that's had huge success for Washington. So that's a good example.
That's a great example. California tries to do some of that. The Washington master service agreements, master contracts, do they have like rolling admission? Like if I'm a new vendor, can I just apply at any time?
They are not rolling. They open up periodically. So they just recently actually released all the data of, how much usage they were getting off of those contracts. And it's really interesting to actually see that there is a variety of different vendors at play, but they're starting to come to the conclusion that they need a bigger and even larger vendor pool. So they'll reopen those contracts periodically over like 3 to 5 years.
I think that's something that California needs to be a little better about. Eugene, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, things like the TDDC contract, where if you didn't get
Which
on,
is like it's basically our state's staff augmentation contract.
Yes,
right?
it is. Yeah,
we'll never call it that because the unions hate calling it that, but that's sort of what it is.
Yes, I think they opened it up at the beginning and they opened it up again a couple years later. But if you're not on it within those yearly, multi-year cycles, it takes forever to get on there. And then
I think it's like 7 years is the life of the contract.
Right.
So please open it up. And
Please
everyone's waiting, ready to apply. But yeah, it's difficult.
It's difficult. And what it does, talk about the cost, it adds an administrative burden because a small company or an emerging company trying to enter the market now has to partner with a firm that has that contract vehicle. And now there's administrative costs that the contract holder is going to put on it. And it just adds additional costs to the state. So by making more rolling admissions, or at least kind of more periodic opening up of admissions, you could help drive the cost down a little bit for the state.
Well, and I think achieve another goal that the state has, which is bringing new vendors into this market and making state government market more available to small businesses or disabled veteran businesses. So even pitched like, just open it up to small businesses. You guys have all these small business contracting goals. What if we just let small businesses apply? And I understand they're slammed. They have incredible workloads over there.
Right.
Nothing ever gets undone. So that workload is only growing. But you're right. It would go a long way to making things a little more efficient in the state.
One of the things that's really interesting about what Washington did is I think there's a sweet spot in terms of the population, right? You don't want to open it up to completely everyone. You want qualified
Right.
vendors that can actually do the work that the agencies want. And so they put limits on the number of vendors by category, but then they broke out the categories you were talking about: small business, disadvantaged business, enterprise, right? So it positions the state to effectively achieve those strategic procurement goals because they have those categories readily available, and everybody in each category is qualified to a certain standard.
That's great.
So it's really wonderful.
I think they should also kick people off of those after a while. Like if you've been
Yeah.
on it for 7 years and you haven't done any business on
Yes.
it, you don't need to be on it anymore. It's just another layer of like administrative burden in administering one of these contracts. Same thing with like our software license program. If you have been on it and you haven't sold anything, like why are we not kicking people off?
I
It's-
completely
That's a-
agree with that,
yeah.
100%, because what you want is a really engaged vendor pool that's servicing the local community and is engaged in the local community and understands the needs and the direction, not just being on a contract for
Right.
the sake of being on a contract.
Right. I mean, you want value-added resellers, not just resellers, right? Let's put the
Right.
let's put the emphasis on what needs to happen. There needs to be value there.
Yep, for sure. Okay, what else have you seen, Heidi, that works?
Something else I've seen, Washington is also leveraging the NASPO contracts, so the national contracts. So in addition to their own contracts, over the last couple of years, I've seen them buy actual software products through national cooperative agreements. So the ERP project, the statewide financials ERP project in Washington, they selected Workday. They basically did that in just a few, 3 months, right? They did an evaluation and then were able to actually transact the software deal. I think that very similar to the master contracts, but it's a different mechanism that I
Yep.
think has been incredibly helpful,
So, like,
particularly around product.
Not recreating the wheel, which we kind of like to
Right.
do in California. And I understand like the justification is like, well, we drive a ton of volume so we can get a better price. We can, really stick it to our specific needs, but there's something out there that works for, 22
Yeah.
states. Like, why can't it work for
Can't
us?
jump on it. And then I think the third thing that comes to mind, Jen, is that states that have conversations with vendors before they start a procurement just generally are more successful. There's this lore around, the cone of silence because we're going to, have a procurement. One of my favorite sayings is that it is so hard to communicate on paper.
Yeah.
Right. And so, see some agencies and some procurement officers that are like, oh, can't talk to anyone, where in many states, those early upfront conversations to really understand the marketplace and to help them understand your needs, those are places where there's, much better understanding because people have had the opportunity to have conversations in advance.
And I do think that's created an unfair advantage to some vendors within California because I think there's a famous saying, if you haven't talked to a department or an agency about their problem and what potential solutions are before that solicitation is out,
Don't even.
you've already lost the solicitation, right? So, if you're a small vendor or an emerging vendor trying to form relationships with the state, it makes it really, really difficult to even be competitive because so many other firms have had those discussions and had a start on you in terms of responding to that solicitation. I think something that you used to do and some organizations are still trying to do is kind of facilitate that dialogue between the commercial entities and public sector.
Yeah.
I think that this dialogues like this podcast, they're absolutely necessary because this discussion continuously needs to happen instead of just kind of the periodic get-togethers that we've seen.
Yeah, I think one of the other speakers at the Little Hoover Commission hearing pointed out the state doesn't know what they want.
Yeah.
So like, what is a good procurement when you don't know what you want? Who knows? Like, it's kind of doomed for failure. And so you're right, having that dialogue. I think what the state struggles with is like what that looks like. Is it like a vendor day? Because we have some of those and they don't really go anywhere. Like, good intentions, yes, we love them. Vendors love them. They'll show up. They'll fly their teams in. They'll do a cool demo for you. Yeah. But like, if nothing happens, nothing happens. It sort of falls off. That we don't see procurements coming out, or Is it a POC where we're going to pay you $1 and make you build something and work for 18 months to ultimately have the same result, which is like nothing ends up coming out, or we vibe code something ourselves? What does that look like in a great environment where that's effective?
I mean, the vendor days are great in terms of getting vendors to communicate what they can do to help the state. I think they need to listen more, quite frankly. And I think a day where it's almost a department day or an agency day where and some organizations try to just say, hey, let's talk through kind of what's going on in terms of our department. I think a little bit more, I guess, depth in terms of here's programmatically, not necessarily from a technology perspective, but from programmatically, here's what the problems are that we're trying to solve as a department or as an agency. Health and Human Services, labor, public safety. Here's the things that we're struggling with. And then vendors can then understand what the problems are and maybe tailor their solutions to what the issues are that those agencies and departments are facing. I've talked to a lot of vendors, and a lot of the vendors have great solutions, but what they're having a really difficult time doing is articulating how those solutions will meet the problems or address the problems of the public sector because they don't understand it.
Right.
So somebody's got to translate that for them, or we got to help the departments and agencies at least communicate what their problems are a little bit better so that they are a little bit more direct or kind of precise in terms of how to help address those problems.
And like, when do you think this happens? Is this pre-RFI or like requests for information? Those are all very formal. Everyone puts them through a bid process. Like, when does this conversation of like, what are we trying to accomplish here? When does this happen?
I think it's a relationship.
Yeah.
The way I would describe it is it's a relationship. So it's not a one-time event like an RFI. That can serve a purpose, but again, you're trying to communicate on paper. But it's, how do you create an environment that says we need we need commercial entities and we need government to figure out how to work together, and how do you create an opportunity for ongoing dialogue? So it's not a one-time thing like, hey, I am going to eventually need this, so I'm inviting you in. It's a broader conversation led by somebody in the organization that's building those kinds of strategic partnerships with vendors and the commercial entities.
I think there's a couple. If you follow the funding cycle, there's a couple opportune times for this to happen. When the BCPs are being put in place, hey, I'm submitting a BCP to go address this problem.
Which is, so everyone knows, because not everyone does. When is that?
That's usually around October, November timeframe, right? Budget change proposals, you start putting that together. And then when the budget is out, right, and they're approved and things are actually happening, then you can have another discussion and say, hey, I got the funding. Here's potentially what I'm going to be working on, or what this money is going, what it's going to be going towards. So there's going to be solicitation coming out. What could you potentially help me with in terms of addressing this problem? So, I mean, I think if you just look at the funding cycle and follow the money, that's usually a good way for you to communicate, and vendors will listen if there's money there.
Yeah. And what's crazy to me is like, even that isn't wholly transparent. Like, how many bids have you seen where they're like, we don't know how much this is going to cost.
Yeah.
You tell me how much this is going to cost. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, tell me how much you have and I'll tell you how much I can provide you for that. Yeah, that always baffles me, because then what they're getting is not an apples to apples comparison, right? Like, you may have awesome ideas, but it's going to be $100 million. And I didn't tell anybody, but I only have $10 million to spend.
Well, it also creates that unfair advantage you're talking about people understand the state. If you can look at the budget information.
Oh yeah, we can find it.
You can find how much money is there, and
then how much does it stink if like the guy with the best solution can't find it?
Right, and or how much is it if they come up with a Cadillac solution and they're way over the budget, but if they had just tailored it because they knew what the budget was, they might have prevailed in that solicitation. So I mean, I
think a lot of this transparency, honesty could be accomplished through these early, consistent, ongoing dialogues, and like, quit hiding the ball, right?
Right.
It's out there. Let's just be super transparent about it. I remember floating this idea with an executive team at probably like 2 or 3 years ago. And the CIO in the room, and, project management was there, and procurement was there, and fiscal was there. And I was like, just tell us how much you have to spend. And they were like, well, the problem with that is if we said we had $10, we would get a bunch of bids for $10. And I'm like, so?
Yeah.
Right?
Like, that sounds great to me.
You'll get the best value for that $10.
Yeah, I'm like, what's the problem with that? Like, okay. And they were like, well, how do we know that, it really costs $10? And I'm like, we should have done that already. Like, we should have figured that out. What we need is going to cost this much money, and that's how you budget for it.
Right.
But my favorite part is at the end of this conversation, when everyone around the room had told me, like, no, we can't do that. It's not possible. The CIO was like, why can't we? And it was like blank stares around the room. And And she was like, we should be able to do that. That sounds completely reasonable. And I'm like, thank you,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
common sense. There's not even rules that say you can't share that kind of information.
Right. Well, I think there is all this lore and all of this kind of rumor about kind of how it's supposed to work, or kind of thoughts about how it works because it's always operated this way. And I do think if you were talking about how this is very much a policy-driven shop, somebody needs to actually look at the policy and go, well, what's real and what's not real in terms of what you can do. And where it doesn't make sense, maybe we adjust the policy, but let's put the rumors to rest and say, here's what's out there in terms of what we can do in terms of expediting procurements.
And let's just try it.
Yeah, why not?
Throw it out there for a couple. Worst case scenario, you get a project failure. Guess what? We already have those all over the place anyway. Like, let's try it. If it doesn't work, we can try something else. Yeah. We talked a lot about references and sort of the burden that causes, frankly, on everyone involved in a procurement, right? Like, I've scored procurements where I'm like, holy smokes, if I have to look at one more resume, I'm going to rip my hair out. And then on the other side of it, as you know, your consulting experience, you guys have filled out numerous reference forms, both for individuals and also for your companies and for projects. Heidi, in your experience, have you seen anyone that does it better or more efficiently than we do in California?
I have never seen anything like California when it comes to references.
That's not a compliment, is what you're telling me, right? Oh.
And when Eugene and I first started working together, actually, I was like, no, this can't be right. And he's like, yes, this is how we do it. And honestly, I found it quite shocking, just the level of scrutiny in terms of the number of years experience, the qualifications, the references with the signatures, just that process is quite burdensome relative to pretty much anywhere that I've seen. What I've seen is a much simpler process in most places, right? Where there aren't forms to fill out. There isn't a specific set of quals tied to resumes. It's provide your resume and we're going to evaluate it. So a lot less down to the exact number of points by a specific skill. And I think it still tends to work because the clients are evaluating for best value, always, backed up by oral interview. So if you're picking only on the resume and not on, on the paper, not on the person that you actually met as part of the procurement, I would say, gosh, that's a little too tactical in terms of, how you're thinking about your procurements.
Well, plus we've also always met people that look great on paper. And then you meet them and you're like, what kind of AI did they use to pull that resume together, right?
And I think that as people are using AI more and more to respond to these RFPs and putting these proposals together, all these proposals are going to start look the same. And the scores aren't going to be differentiated when it comes to the references. So what's the point of actually going to do this? I mean, I do think what Heidi's saying is absolutely right. You should talk to them and have a discussion and score the interviews more, because these are the people you're going to be interacting with throughout the project, and put more weight in terms of the interview score versus the references. Now, people tend to want quantitative scoring.
Yeah, I was just going to say, interviews are very subjective, right? And so that, from a transparency standpoint, is a little scary.
Right.
It's like, if Eugene speaks well, he's going to win this. But is that really what we're scoring, and what's going to get us the best deal at the end of the day?
But I mean, I will ask, from a references standpoint, who's actually going to ask somebody that's going to give them a bad score to fill out that reference?
No, I mean, they're completely pointless. I've talked about it on this podcast numerous times. I'm like, no one's ever going to turn in a bad reference. Yeah.
It's tough to figure out what the right answer is going to be. But you're right. And this is the challenge. There's a bit of subjectivity that's going to be required in a solicitation. I mean, you can't kind of boil it down to points and a quantitative analysis at all times. When you're buying something or you're going into a relationship agreement with somebody, there has to be some level of trust and some level of comfort in terms of that discussion. Now, how do you score that? That becomes the difficult thing, right?
That's the key.
Well, I think also something on references that references don't capture is like when you've maybe not done the best on a project. Like, if I want to know how a company is done and I ask for references, I'm getting like the good successes from that company.
Right.
But I'm missing that they have failures all over the place, or, they're getting sued here and kicked out there, and they've been on 5 other projects within my state government that have failed. Like, that's not scored as a part of a reference.
Right.
And so when you don't sort of look comprehensively at the vendors that are bidding on your stuff, you do miss a huge part of that, right?
Right. Well,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And then the other thing is, from a scoring perspective, you can't factor any of that stuff in.
I know.
So let's say there is a firm that's failed 5 or 10 times all around you, but they've provided you 3 perfect references. You've scored them perfectly.
You're going to get 100%,
because
right?
of that.
But
So,
in
yeah.
reality, it's like a failing grade.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't even know. Have you guys seen anywhere that sort of incorporates that? Hey, have you had failed projects? Because if you have, we might not want to work with you.
Yeah, I actually worked on a procurement where we asked the system integrator specifically to tell us about their project failures and tell us
I
what
love
they
that.
learned from them. And it was really insightful because what do you write, right?
Right.
And some of them were honest and some of them tried to put lipstick on the pig, but it was a great exercise to learn.
That's so easy to do. You could just add that question in your interviews or whatever.
Did they ask for contact information of those failed projects?
Correct.
Oh,
We
they
did.
Oh,
Yep.
perfect.
So we can call
Absolutely.
them and double check with them on
Right.
why it failed.
Yep.
Because, I mean, look, failures are never completely a vendor's
Yeah.
fault or completely the government's fault, but they happen. And, like, why did they happen? And what, frankly, more importantly, what did we learn from that?
Right.
And
to
did you
not fail again.
And did you fail gracefully? Because if you are going to fail, you still want to maintain that relationship with your client rather than burn the house down on the way out.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. If we took nothing else from this conversation, like adding that to the procurement process would be a total game changer.
Yeah.
And frankly, like change the makeup of the vendor community that's serving governments,
Yeah. Well,
at
and,
least in this day, right?
Right.
and you want those vendors that, you are going to have for a long time that are going to work through the hard times because these are hard projects.
Right.
Totally. Okay. Any sort of encouraging thoughts? Sort of, what are you working on now? You said I've been consulting for 30 years. Eugene, you too. You guys have both taken sort of, you have a new venture that you're working on now. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's so exciting to actually be at a place where we can reveal this. We've been working on it for a little while. So Eugene and our new venture is called Lynxar. Lynxar is a professional services firm focused exclusively on the public sector. We are AI native and women owned. We really focus on 2 things: helping clients in the public sector through their transformation journeys. So everything from planning to project readiness, implementation support, oversight, those types of things. And then the second area where we focus is everything in the data and analytics space. So think data strategy, data architecture, data cleansing, data conversion, data governance, anything data. So we're really excited. We decided to start Lynxar because we saw a real change in the environment at this inflection point of AI. Consulting is changing and government is changing. And so we wanted to start with a clean page and be part of the forefront of creating the new professional services firm for public sector.
That's incredible. Congratulations,
Thank
first
you.
of all.
Yeah.
It is a big endeavor, and I think could not have any more of a just rock star team sort of heading it up. Your reputations and your names sort of speak for themselves in this market. Where are you guys working?
Want to answer that one?
Well, right now we've been working at Department of State Hospitals, helping them with some support as they're going on with their new electronic health records implementation. We've helped Washington. They're implementing what their equivalent is for cradle to career. So we're helping them with the actual implementation and deployment of that. So
Lots of data and AI over there.
Lots of data and AI.
Lots
and
of exciting things on the horizon. Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyone would be ridiculously silly not to look at you guys if they needed, especially small business, women-owned business. Kudos for all of that.
Yep.
And can't wait to see where you guys take this. I think government is well served having you guys helping them. And certainly I appreciate our, decades of friendship and counsel. You both are mentors to me and sort of the first people I call when I'm like, what is going on with X? So I very much appreciate you guys, and we appreciate having you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so
we
much,
appreciate
Jen.
you so much. I feel like this is like a record drop happening during an interview with a DJ. So we're kind of excited.
Oh my gosh. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.